Dear friends, good afternoon and welcome. We gather this day in a sacred circle of love because a dear loved one has died. But more importantly, we gather this day because a dear loved one has lived a full life filled with love and with laughter, with sorrow and with grief, a full human life with its challenges and its abundance of blessings. Phyllis was a force to be reckoned with, a bright and a shining light in this world. She loved her family, she loved this city, because deep down she loved life. She loved this earth and had a deep belief that it could be better, it could be more beautiful, it could be more just, it could be more inclusive, and that humanity had more potential to live into. She used everything she had, everything she was, to will that vision of a world into being, and she often did, in large and in small ways, always infused with love and with grace. We gather here because that life, Phyllis's life, mattered to each person in this room and many more beyond these walls. That life touched your life in some way, however small or however great. And today, for that life lived, we give thanks and we celebrate and we hold one another and we let sacred memories hold us, and a love that knows no end hold Phyllis. Welcome. In our tradition, we begin by lighting our chalice. It's a symbol of the warmth of love, a passion for justice, and a beacon of a free and open faith. Ellie and McKenna will light our chalice today in honor and in memory of Phyllis Dodge Layton. A reading from Edna St. Vincent Millay. I am not resigned to the shutting away of loving hearts into the hard ground. So it is, and so it will be, for so it has been, time out of mind. Into the darkness they go, the wise and the lovely. Crowned with lilies and with laurel they go, but I am not resigned. Lovers and thinkers into the earth, to be one with the dust. A fragment remains, but the best is lost. The answers quick and keen, the honest look, the laughter, the love are gone. They are gone to feed the roses. Elegant and curled is the blossom, fragrant is the blossom of those roses, I know, but still I do not approve. More precious was the light in their eyes than all the roses in the world. Gently they go, the beautiful, the tender, the kind. Quietly they go, the intelligent, the witty, and the brave. I know, but I am not resigned. Friend George Thompson is going to share a remembrance, and then Don is.
I am absolutely honored and pleased to share a few reflections about my experiences with Phyllis and talk a little bit about her. Don told me 3 to 4 minutes, and I will stick to 3 to 4 minutes. And I'm going to do that with using 2 words, hope and sanctity, or sanctuary. Hope. Phyllis gave us hope. The world seems to be filled with anger, distrust, and deceit. Phyllis's mission seemed to bring everybody together. I wore this tie today because it symbolizes family and it symbolizes world community. We can live together. Phyllis knew that. Phyllis did a lot to bring and welcome all people to this community. She was a member of many committees, and if she didn't see something going the right way, she would start a committee. She was a member of the Education Minority Task Force, and there will be things downstairs for you to look at. She was a member of the Rochester Better Chance. She was a member of the Rochester Orchestra. She was a member of the League of Women Voters, planning committee for the World Festival. She was founding member of the World International Association. She was a member of the steering committee for Building Equality Together, BET. And she worked on the celebrations committee because she knew that once you got to know people, you would find out and you wouldn't be so fearful of them. So family, I want you to know that I have great admiration, and all of these folks in this room have tremendous appreciation for what your grandmother, your mother and father have done in this community. Phyllis truly believed in the values of this church. She truly believed in the inherent worth and dignity of all people. It made no difference to her what color your skin was or what religion you were. She valued you for you and who you were. The theme for the church this month is sanctuary. As director of the Diversity Council at one time, it was my responsibility to go around to churches, or I would be invited to churches around town and talk about the inclusiveness, about the importance of inclusiveness. Phyllis wrote articles, and there's one downstairs that Don laid out, and it's called Cultural Diversity in Rochester. And it was about the advantages of inclusiveness. And it talked about the folks coming to this community and the support that they needed. She was all about helping people. As I said before, the world is full of hate now, lies, and apparently the belief that if you can get away with something, do it. Phyllis showed us a different belief and a direction. She was all about love for all people. She provided. She was a walking beacon of hope and welcomeness. Family members and friends, we were blessed to have had a real, true leader walk around with us and have contact with her and to learn from her. Phyllis believed in the words and the dignity of every human being, that all people on earth have an equal claim to life, liberty, and justice. And no ideal, or philosophy is superior to one single human life. She was a humanist, and not only by participating, but actually leading those efforts. I read quite a bit about true leaders. There's a gentleman named Matt Mayberry who writes articles, and he said a true leader is a person who develops others and helps them to see the potential that they're capable of. Many folks in this community, Phyllis, helped to do and to develop that capability. We have a certain amount of time on earth. Phyllis used her time well, as I can see by the folks in this room that come to show appreciation to the family. And I hope you take the time to visit with the family downstairs and also let them know about your personal contacts with Phyllis. Again, I'd say we have been truly fortunate to have been around and to benefit from this magnificent 5'1" woman with tremendous potential. And I have this little plaque that says, "Make a difference." Phyllis made a difference in this community and in the world. And I appreciate the opportunity to have been around and to participate in that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Welcome to you all. I am a little bit like Donald Trump. Very little. The best example is if I leave the script, I might lose control. So I'm pleased to participate in this ceremony, and my program is to go some chapters that'll enlighten you in some ways that you might not know about Phyllis. So, the passing of Phyllis marked the end of a precious person, but occasioned a flood of memories. I hope to share some key milestones along the way. The background. I like to believe that her innate intellect is due in part to her parents and their parenting. Otis and Elda Dodge were very different people, but they complemented each other, and the result is their children. The fact that Otis always accepted promotions that resulted in relocation made Phyllis go to new schools very often. New schools required making new friends. She did very well at that. That she made good grades and has written in her extensive private notes that she was doing well in school was easy for her. Milestone number 1. In junior high school, she lived in Wellesley Hills, Massachusetts, and in summer worked as a camp counselor at Row Camp. There she was introduced to Unitarianism. That matched her way of thinking. One peculiarity of the Unitarian denomination is that the ministers get summer off. Or did in those days. The result was that ministers were available to visit this camp and did in rotation and greatly influenced Phyllis. She had some heroes and heroines that contributed greatly to her, what shall I say, state, condition, all right? Milestone number 2. She sought a, quote, good liberal arts college, close quote. Well, it had to be coeducational. That would be Oberlin College in Ohio. The first college to not discriminate by race, and the first co-ed college not to discriminate by gender. Her degree was in kindergarten primary education, and there she met me. Bump in the road. Milestone number 3. She'd always said that she wanted to have children. She wanted to be a mother. We had the double problems of relative infertility. Getting pregnant was one, and she had the second problem of staying pregnant. Actually, she was pregnant again in 1957, and she had said, I'll be darned if I'm going to give up a good job just because I'm pregnant again. So she was pregnant right up until the very next to last day, which was Memorial Day. She didn't work that day. We had wanted to go to Europe, always planned to go to Europe sometime, but figured that we would be more likely approved for adoption if we looked stable or settled. So we arranged to go to England. Right up until Ellie was born, she was 3 months old when we left for England. Milestone X. My father used to write X on his golf card, and that stood for unknown quantity or 10. Milestone X is not really one bump, but Phyllis's gradual but steady realization of herself. She'd acquired personhood, knowing that she was a woman, that she was an adult with a raft of personal attributes that gave her tickets to contribute, to lead, to act, and to promote. She was gentle and loving, never mean or vengeful. She was something else. Now, I want to give you a vignette. Phyllis once hosted a woman from Uruguay who came to Mayo for treatment of her breast cancer. That started a stream of women from Argentina, Brazil, as well as Uruguay. Her friends from all over the world came and said, "Come see us sometime." We often obliged and traveled extensively. I think she's been in all 50 states and all over Western Europe, plus 5 weeks in Russia, and 5 weeks in a trip to Vietnam, China, and Japan. Now, summary, reflecting my opinions. Well, she has said her favorite year was the one we spent in England. We lived in Kew, adjacent to the Royal Botanical Gardens. Phyllis pushed her British pram with baby aboard through the gardens nearly every day, sometimes alternating with the Thames River embankment, which was also nearby. I believe that the most rewarding, sustained period of her life was from 1954 to 1961, when we lived in Chicago. She had a stimulating job at Scott Forsman School Book Publishers, Sally, Dick, and Jane Spot Puff, remember? And she was teaching and creating teachers' guidebooks and made enduring friendships with interesting people. She exploited many options for personal growth and enrichment of being alive. She became a life member of the Art Institute of Chicago. She took a course in painting as well as one in art appreciation, and we went there often. We had first left side first balcony seats at the Chicago Orchestra Hall. She attended a workshop on Japanese floral arranging, sessions at the University of Chicago and some famous psychologist whose name I can't recall, and many others. We had known each other for 70 years and married for 67 years. I have been richly blessed and extremely lucky. I loved her dearly.
I knew I had no chance to follow that. It's just heartwarming to see so many friends and family here in this special place. I just thank you all. So I also knew that I had no chance to try to relay what my mother gave or meant to me in 3 or 4 minutes. And so I decided to narrow my focus, one of the things I like to do, and reduce the challenge a little bit. That's something different from my parents. So with my daughter's help, we'll give you one example. And that is, my mother loved music. She sang and played and listened to a great variety of music. In fact, probably nobody in this room knows that one night in high school I came home and she was watching Pink Floyd, The Wall. Typically it was classical music or international of all of it. But she shared that love for music with us, and when Cindy and Ellie and I were little, she took us all to piano lessons, and Ellie went on to play violin, and Cindy played cello, and I played viola, and I actually played viola on this stage with John Vettel, the viola player tonight. He kept practicing, and I did not. It's nice to see him here. So we went on and played, and then when Cindy and Dave had their boys, Adam and Bill, who are here today, Mom and Dad got them a piano so that they could experience music growing up just as we did. And then, of course, when McKenna and Kira were born here in Rochester, Mom and Dad got us a piano from Charterhouse, and so we continued that tradition. So I could think of absolutely nothing more appropriate to share this part of Mom with you and with her today than having her youngest grandchild play the piano for you. So with pride that I can't even explain, I present to you my youngest daughter, Kira Layton, on piano.
Well done. When Ellie, Phyllis's daughter, was about 6 years old and Phyllis was about to have Greg, she said, "Now, Mommy, maybe you can stop being president of everything." Phyllis was president of many things, a leader and a stalwart defender of human dignity and justice, a kind and compassionate person who led with grace and invited more and more people into the work. And most of all, perhaps she was president or a leader or inhabited the office of so many hearts. Yours, Don, and Greg, and Ellie, and Cindy, and so many others in this family and in this room. Friends all, she was a queen of hearts. I didn't have much time to know Phyllis, serving here for only just over a year now, and well after her life and identity had changed due to Alzheimer's. But let me tell you, it doesn't take the minister at First UU Church in Rochester long to learn who Phyllis Dodge Layton was in this church and in this city and in this world. The stories that have come in just in this short time just begin to scratch the surface of this woman. Similar to the words of Edna St. Vincent Millay, in this world, Phyllis was brave and she was witty and she was kind and lived a life that blossomed into beauty and still does, even in our grief. No memorial service, however lovely, can completely put into words, into music or story the fullness of any person's life, their identity, their hopes and dreams, their legacy, and their lasting impact on the world. But the stories that we gather begin to give us a glimpse. Here's a glimpse with many reflections from family and friends, several people who wrote in their remembrances. This is just some of what they said. They wrote, "Phyllis was a remarkable woman. I admired her commitment to social justice work and equity, helping to make Rochester a welcoming and interesting city. She was well-informed, she was welcoming and loving, she loved being outside and in open spaces. She was, as printed in the Rochester Post-Bulletin this week, a woman ahead of her time. She was a doer. She was involved in everything and anything that had to do with diversity. She was a beacon of welcomeness. She was an engine of power. She was inclusive, non-judgmental. She was a guiding light and a giant heart, hardworking, steadfast, in a quiet and kind manner that stayed courageous and strong, always humble and mighty." Don't we all want to live lives where we're remembered as humble and mighty at the same time? Friend David Dale wrote, "Mrs. Layton was a second mom to me. I lived next door to the Laytons from birth, and Greg became my very first friend in life. Mrs. Layton was wonderful, always welcoming, and treated me as a second son, or another son. She had a genuine passion and enjoyment for the outdoors." He says, "I fondly remember skiing with Greg and following Mrs. Layton on a late evening cross-country ski through an aspen forest. It was past sunset, there was a full moon, a fresh, heavy snow was falling. There was no sound other than the crunch of the skis on the frozen snow beneath us. What I remember in that beautiful night was Mrs. Layton just enjoying and commenting to Greg and I about the beauty of the woods and the night. She loved being outside, and that passion for open spaces and fresh air has stayed with me." Friend Herta Madison wrote, "In 1988, when we moved to Rochester, I looked in the phone book under International and called the Rochester International Association, the RIA, and Phyllis answered. She invited me to a presentation by a Korean official, and when he was late to that, we sat around introducing ourselves, and that's where we met. The RIA was her baby, and in her usual way, as I was to find through the years, she immediately made everybody do something. She asked me to chair the World Festival the coming year, and she was constantly organizing, getting people involved. Sometimes I think she just ran around town and grabbed people in the street and said, 'Do you want to do something?' Sometimes she could be exasperating by always being on you to make sure everything was done, even if it was done, but her tenacity kept things going, even when it was not easy. Many people," she writes, "including myself, thank her for making us part of something important and that we stuck to it." Brian Falloon, the president currently of the Rochester International Association, wrote, Phyllis has left an indelible legacy on the community of Rochester with her work at RIA and beyond. The organization would not have the respect and the affection that it does without Phyllis's hard work and her dedication. It has endured in an ever-changing world, in part to the passion that she promoted, her celebration of diversity. He writes, "Thank you, Phyllis, for seeing the world the way you did and for leaving us a path to follow." Friend Michelle Severson wrote, "She was a small woman with a giant heart. She was my role model in trying to become a woman of strength and of courage. I remember a quote she shared with me that you cannot save people, you can only love them, which changed my whole way of thinking of others. My world was changed because of Phyllis's presence in it." Friend Walter wrote, "She showed me that by participating and sharing my culture with others, it would be one of the most efficient and effective ways to help one another in community. Knowing that students like myself were coming from impoverished countries to attend college, she became engaged sharing her home, her family. Mrs. Layton and Dr. Layton have been my greatest supporters of my dreams. Among these dreams, getting the education I needed so that I could help my family in Guatemala." Sister Susan Moore wrote, "My first real memory of Phyllis is taking her to the airport to fly from O'Hare in Chicago to Portland, Oregon. It was 1950. Don had been there as well. Phyllis was teaching kindergarten in Oregon. And I was so impressed that she was flying in an airplane by herself 2,000 miles across the United States. I couldn't imagine anyone having the courage to do that. But my next memory is somewhat embarrassing to reveal. She wrote it. I didn't choose this. She wrote it. She said, the following June after this, Phyllis and Don returned to Highland Park to get married. I was 12 years old, and I had believed that I had fallen in love with Don, and he was the love of my life. And now my very own sister was marrying the love of my life. I had been chosen to be a bridesmaid in the ceremony. How could I get through this service while experiencing such grief? Needless to say, the wedding continued beautifully, and the marriage has been very successful. I hope that story isn't new right now, Don. If it is, we can talk after the service. But Susan also wrote, Phyllis's piano and organ playing were an inspiration to me. Her intellectual prowess was always before me. Her artwork and painting seemed like magic to me. Her independence, her individuality, knowing who she was and what she wanted, has been a role model for me. Thanks, sis. Son Greg wrote, even though she was tiny and I was bigger, younger, and stronger, I almost dreaded going to big cities with her because she would wear me out. If we went to Chicago, she would want to go to the Botanical Gardens and the Art Institute, the Museum of Science and Industry, and. She would walk so fast I couldn't keep up. Mom was extraordinarily kind and generous, but it wasn't at all just financial or some taught obligation to be nice. She was engaged. She showed up. If there was a potluck or a dinner or a march or a ceremony or a rally or a walk or a concert or an event or whatever, she was there. Dad and I would actually complain because we wanted to stay home sometimes, but she had it on the calendar. She went to everything. She left very big shoes to fill, he writes. But here's how I'm going to try to follow her lead. Combine strength and kindness. Keep my heart open to people in need and actually trying to help, and that's a big difference. Be engaged in the world. Show up. Stay active. Ski, golf, garden, swim, exercise. Love my family. Enjoy making and eating homemade soup. Thanksgiving gravy is an art, not a recipe, and she'll be there to help. And Don wrote, I would call Phyllis a humanitarian or an ethical humanist. She identified Unitarian at age 14 after some affection for Waitstill and Martha Sharp, who helped save Jews during World War II. And Don found a collection of her writings, some composed when she was a girl, about becoming a person and becoming a woman. And Don said, she really turned out to be an amazing woman. She did, Don. And Phyllis herself wrote in the article that George showed, While the world grows in population, it shrinks in size. All this change presents opportunities to break down barriers and make peaceful problem-solving between nations more likely, we hope. We hope too, Phyllis. She said, volunteer, offer hospitality to a visitor, host an international student, introduce your children to new friends who may be from a different country. Cultural diversity is here now in Rochester. She says, be a part of it and let it broaden your life. And finally, friend Michelle wrote, I am sure that heaven has gained a soul who is committed to ensuring that everyone has a gateway there. There are more stories, countless, that live within our hearts that are about to be shared at the reception and in the days and the months and the years to come, ways that her life impacted the world and maybe shaped your own. Adlai Stevenson, speaking of his friend Eleanor Roosevelt, wrote these words, and now we must say farewell. We are always saying farewell in this world, always standing at the edge of some loss, attempting to retrieve some memory, some human meaning from the silence. But something which was precious is gone, and we pray that there is peace and a glimpse of sunset. Today we weep for ourselves and we are lonelier. Someone has gone from our life who was like the certainty of refuge. Someone has gone from the world who is like the certainty of honor. For all these stories and the sacred memories and all the little ways known and unknown that your life is different now because of her, we are grateful. For Phyllis, the certainty of refuge and honor. May it be so. Amen. The hymn is number 38, Morning Has Broken, in your gray hymnal. I invite you to rise in body or spirit as we sing together in Phyllis's memory. To remain standing for the benediction. After the benediction, please join us downstairs. Follow the family out during the recessional music for refreshments and conversation, for storytelling, and for embraces. I invite you, as you're comfortable, to either place your hand on your heart or grab a hand next to you. Phyllis was about connecting community. and breathe deep the breath of life. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, in the opening of the buds and the rebirth of spring, in the blueness of the skies and the warmth of summer, in the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, in the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember her. And when we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick in heart, when we have some joy that we crave to share, we will remember her. As long as we live, she too will live, for she is part of us. Dear Phyllis, beloved of earth, of sky, of God, of stars, of spirit, from the dust and earth from whence you came, the earth that you love so much, so now you return. We carry with us the nourishment you brought to us. Into the embrace of love and light eternal, one with the earth and the stars, may love hold you and us on your way. As you go on your way, may love go with you. May love go before you to show you the way. And may love go behind you to encourage you, beside you to befriend you, above you to watch over, and within you to give you peace. May it be so. Amen.